Oh man, I have been just ecstatic ever since I heard about this GoblinTown NFT nonsense. Like, oh my god, I have never been happier to see a silly little doodle of a middle finger giving three more middle fingers to all these NFT bros and whatnot. And like, what's great about it is that they pulled this whole stunt to protest a different problematic aspect of NFTs, but in doing so, they highlighted what is quite possibly one of the biggest problems with NFTs that a lot of laymen don't actually know, and has just brought it straight to the forefront. And what's the reason why I'm so happy about this is because a couple years ago, when NFTs were first getting really big, I, of course, did some research. You know, if everybody's talking about them, I want to know what these things are. So I looked up, like, blockchain technology and how NFTs work and all this various stuff. And one of the first things I concluded upon doing that just most basic, like, day's worth of research, I realized that, theoretically, somebody could just swap out all of everyone's NFTs from a given project for some random garbage, and nobody would be able to do anything about it. And now, that has happened. And, to be fair, apparently, after this story came out, it's happened a couple more times in the past, so, like, this isn't the first time this has happened, but this is the first time that it's been big enough to be on the radar for even crypto bros, or people who, like, keep their finger on the pulse of all that stuff. So, I feel like they finally really brought this to the forefront to highlight this problem. And just so everybody knows, this is actually my second video on this subject. My first video was more specifically hammering home why I don't think NFTs or blockchain technology in general, so like cryptocurrency and whatnot, just does not work for the gaming space. And I was pointing out all the various reasons why it's virtually impossible to make an actually good NFT-based game in any capacity. And if you want to go back and watch that video, I'll leave a link in the description and put a card and everything for you to go to, and you go back and watch that either before or after this video. That shouldn't really matter all that much. But what I do worry is that somebody could theoretically watch that video, and maybe if they're rubbing together their two brain cells, they might come away with the conclusion that maybe even though NFTs clearly can't work in the gaming space, they might come off with the impression that they could be applicable in other mediums or across other spaces, or maybe there's just some use for this technology that we haven't discovered yet. And I just want to make one more video on this subject to get all of my thoughts out there and just fully explain why this technology is just worthless, scam baity garbage. Because frankly, the more videos that people make talking about why this technology is worthless, the hopefully faster it will go away forever. Now, to actually explain what happened here, GoblinTown was yet another random collection of images that were turned into NFTs, and you know, it's a classic NFT project where they try to sell a bunch of images, and then people can try to buy and trade them to try and make money, even though almost nobody ever does. It's just like Bored Ape Yacht Club or Lazy Lions or all these other garbage projects that people pump out in an afternoon in order to try and make a quick buck. But what makes this unique is that what they did in protest of the various means that trading platforms have been screwing over creators with royalties, they swapped out all the images on their server that the GoblinTown images were being pulled from with this middle finger GIF, so that now everybody who's trying to load up their GoblinTown NFTs, all they get is the same image in all of their wallets, regardless of which images they have. And the thing is that this isn't something unique that they specifically had to like set up some special system in order to pull this off. this is something that is inherently possible with any NFT, because, to be clear, an NFT does not actually store the data that they supposedly represent. You see, the problem with NFTs, one of many, is that the bigger the file of the NFT itself, the more expensive and time-consuming it is to actually trade it between users. So you have a very good reason to try and optimize the amount of data actually stored within the NFT itself. There are a handful of NFT projects that actually store the data they supposedly represent in the actual NFT itself. Usually the hyper low pixel art style images that people make are those kinds of NFTs. But the vast majority of NFTs, especially the more complex ones like 3D models and full-on animations and whatnot, they don't actually store that data in the NFT itself, because that would be way too big. It could be multiple megabytes or even gigabytes of data, which would just be completely unwieldy on the blockchain. So what they do instead is they simply store all that data via conventional means on some server somewhere. And then the NFT simply represents an index to a file on that server that they can then pull from, and then whatever software you use for your wallet and whatnot can simply then display the image that it retrieves from that server. And so, if you know anything about software development, or even if you just understand the basic concept of the internet, you might be able to realize that that means that NFTs are completely mutable at any given time. You see, a good example that I like to use for this is the concept of a URL. When you type in a web address into a browser, the web address itself does not contain any real data. All it is essentially a set of directions for your browser to know to navigate to a specific server on the internet, so that it can then retrieve the data from that server and then display it to you. Take a YouTube link, for example. YouTube videos can be multiple megabytes, if not gigabytes, in size. A simple string of characters is only a few bytes itself. You can't store that data in a simple string of characters and numbers like that. So all that is just an index to one of YouTube's servers that then pulls that video and then displays it to you. And if YouTube wanted to swap out that video for a different video, well, the actual URL wouldn't change. It would still direct you to that spot on that server, but if they change the file to something else, well, now you'd be watching a different video at that location. The same is true with NFTs. If the NFT is stored on, say, some random third-party server, and then that server goes down and is no longer active, well, now they're unable to pull the data from that server, and now you've just got a bunch of blank NFTs on your hand. And in the funnier example of this, you have situations like what GoblinTown did, where if you own the server that the NFTs are referencing, well, then you have complete control over who has what, because you can swap out all the data at any given time. You could very easily, if you wanted to just steal someone's NFT that was super valuable, you could literally just swap out the image that is stored in their NFT reference for a different image, and then you could put that valuable quote-unquote image in someone else's NFT. And then it would look like you had somehow stolen it, when in reality, you just swap the images around. Or, in the ultimate funny example, you could just swap out all the images for some garbage troll image, like what GoblinTown did, and then just call it a day. But I don't want to get too hung up on the specific GoblinTown example too much, because there are so many other problems to go over, and I just kind of want to cover the highlights. And I feel like the biggest aspect of NFTs that really needs to be highlighted more in these kinds of debunking videos is that NFTs aren't even a new concept. NFTs have been around for decades, for as long as the internet has existed. It's like a non-fungible token is fundamental to how online infrastructure works. And a core concept that I think people need to understand about the blockchain, the technology that runs all of these crypto projects that are just complete garbage. Like, the blockchain fundamentally cannot do anything that cannot be done via normal means. What I mean is that the blockchain is a means of doing something. It allows people to do things in a different way than what was possible before. But the actual things that you can use the technology for aren't actually any different or new or novel in any way compared to what we can already do. The fundamental core selling point of the blockchain is merely that you are capable of doing things like trading digital assets without a central authority running things. It is supposedly completely decentralized. You can run it between you and your friends without needing to elect somebody to be the moderator in charge of everything. But as a result, they keep trying to sell the technology as if it is capable of all these things that were never possible before, when in reality it's just trying to implement the same things that we have done before previously via conventional computing technology, but just doing it in a slightly different method. And as a result, even the mere concept of NFTs as a whole just is not an original idea. Like, what I was getting at with my earlier comment is that to even have an online account, that is in itself an NFT. Like, the idea of having a username and a password that you log into, that is a token that is not meant to be replicatable. We can use YouTube as another example again. So take my YouTube channel. You can think of that YouTube channel itself, or at least the account that runs it, as an NFT. It fundamentally is. It is unreplicatable. Even if you download all of my videos, make your own account, upload all of my videos again with all the same descriptions and everything, and then even try to set your username to the same thing as mine, that account may have all of the content that my account does, but it is still not my account. If I log in using my login info, I will still get to my account, not the duplicate, and vice versa. If they log into that account, they will still get that specific account. The account itself is non-replicatable. And to be clear, this isn't a problem. This is how computing technology has worked for decades. It is the fundamental concept behind having a unique user account and identity on any online ecosystem. So the idea that they're trying to push this concept of NFTs as new and novel in any sort of convention anywhere it's just false. It's not a new concept. All they're doing is taking an existing concept, implementing it in a terrible ecosystem, and then trying to pass it off as this novel idea. I mean, as I mentioned previously in my gaming video on this subject, like, even the concept of trading digital goods between users, that's something that you could do normally in a conventional structure. Look at CSGO items, or trading items between accounts in World of Warcraft, or anything like that. Like, it's all fundamentally the same concept. They're just implementing it on the blockchain. And I think that's where we need to really go next, to try and break down why this technology is worthless. Because it all really boils down to the blockchain. So what actually is the blockchain? Well, as I already stated, all that the blockchain is a different method of doing things. It's like if you already had a bike and somebody's trying to sell you a longboard. Both of them are designed to get you from point A to B, they'll just do it in slightly different means and might do it at slightly different rates or with different advantages and disadvantages. The same is true with blockchain technology compared to conventional computing technology. So what advantages do blockchain technology systems supposedly bring to the table over the classic centralized architecture that we all know and use on the internet? Well, there are three, I think, main points that crypto bros try to sell you on why the blockchain is supposedly so amazing and powerful and great and will change the world and everything. It supposedly offers great security. It's impossible to hack, because in order to hack the blockchain, you'd have to hack every computer on the blockchain, or at least 51% of them. Otherwise, if you try to hack one of them and change it, it won't actually matter because the ledger will just get overwritten by what the majority actually says the ledger is. It's also decentralized. There's no central authority actually running the blockchain. It's all run by the individual computers that are connected to the blockchain, all working in harmony, either through proof of work or proof of stake systems or something else akin to that, so that there's nobody in charge who can just one day go up and mess with the system, because it's all in the power of the people, man. And then finally, there's privacy. You know, it's virtually impossible to know what kind of, what user you are just based off of your wallet address. Like, people can send you stuff and you can send them stuff, but unless you yourself tell them what your address is, there's no way for them to know who you are just by looking at the ledger. And at the same time, the ledger is also public, so you can also see all of the transactions, but you also can't see who exactly was making the transactions. That way you can both verify things while maintaining everyone's privacy. And you could probably already start to think of a few problems with these 3 points, and I think that the first one I want to tackle is the privacy one. So already, right off the bat, you might have noticed some paradoxical logic with the point about privacy. Simultaneously, they claim that it's impossible to know who owns what wallet address on the blockchain, while also saying that the blockchain and its ledger that runs all of these transactions is completely public, meaning that you can track who owned what thing at all times, or at least which wallet owned what thing at all times, even if you don't necessarily know who owns that wallet. But if you actually think about how this would be used in real life, you might immediately start to come up with some problems. To continue to use YouTube as an apt example and an analogy for this, right now, for example, my identity is private on this YouTube channel. So it's impossible to know, fundamentally, who I am as I make these videos. But let's say one day I did a face reveal, and I revealed either to all of my viewers or to just some of my friends or somebody, like, who I am, like what I look like and everything, and now you can know who I am by just looking that up. Well, in turn, that means that you now know who made all of the videos in the past leading up to that point. And if I make more videos in the future past that point, then that just means that you know who's making all of those videos as well. Effectively, the privacy only lasts until your identity has been outed, and then once it's outed, now that means that everybody can see every single thing you've done in the past, present, and future simultaneously. Really think about that for a second. If you have a wallet and you want to trade items with other users, you have to tell them your public key. So inherently, they're going to know who you are, or at least that you are that person who owned that thing, and then you can trade with them. And then every single time you trade with another person, you have to do everything in your power to keep your identity secret, which means that if you simply trade with, say, your friend, who now knows that that wallet address represents your wallet, they could tell their friend that that's your wallet address, and then they could tell someone else, and then all of a sudden, they can effectively dox your wallet address, and somebody can figure it out, and thus now, everybody can know that that wallet address is yours, and now they know every single thing that you have ever bought or sold from that wallet address. And then think about it from a data collection standpoint. Like, imagine if, God forbid, we end up in a world where the blockchain actually gets widely adopted, and various big name companies like Amazon start to use this technology. Amazon already, and other companies like it, I don't want to single out Amazon as the only one, but all these big name companies use shopping habits and whatnot to track user behavior and learn more about them. You know, like the classic example of realizing like a pregnant woman was actually pregnant before she found out, because the big data farms were able to recognize the change in her behavior just from her activity on Facebook and Amazon and Google and whatnot, before she even realized that her own behavior had changed in the first place. So, by that same extension, imagine now if companies like Amazon and Google could just pull up a ledger that just had every single wallet's shopping habits and every single transaction that they had ever made, and for how much and for what, ever, in the entire history of the ledger, but past, present, and future. They could easily use that data to track a user's shopping habits, form a profile about them, and then cross-reference that with any other data they've collected from users via traditional means in order to go, oh, this wallet address bought 4 diapers and 3 baby bottles and whatnot, and this other conventional user address was also buying similar items. I'm willing to bet that this user and that user are actually the same user, and now, even if you've perfectly tried to keep your identity private on the blockchain, well, now big companies and whatnot can easily figure out who you are just based on your activity, which is inherently public and impossible to find. Just imagine the fact that, like, you would not be able to hide any data that you store on the blockchain. And people are talking about storing, like, medical records and all of your bank details and whatnot on the blockchain. Imagine if everybody could just look up exactly how much money you had at a whim. It's insane to think about. And of course, it's worth pointing out that NFTs have only made this situation even worse than it already was. Because NFTs are discrete units that can be easily tracked across wallets, that means that if you know somebody owns a particular NFT, then you can simply look up who currently owns the NFT on the blockchain, and now you know exactly whose wallet is theirs. Meaning that there are now hundreds, if not thousands, of morons who've effectively doxed their own wallet and their entire transaction history because they wanted to have an NFT as a profile pic. So, needless to say, to cut a long story short, I think it's clear that privacy does not exist on the blockchain. It is the most fragile concept of privacy ever conceived. Yes, technically speaking, you cannot tell a person's identity from just their wallet address. But as soon as somebody actually uses that wallet to start doing literally anything, then people will be able to figure out who you are, and as a result, your identity will be outed, and now everything you do can be tracked by literally anyone, since the ledger can be downloaded by anyone. So, after crossing privacy off the list, let's talk about the concept of decentralization. Surely, the blockchain must actually be decentralized after all. The core concept of the blockchain is that no one person owns it. There's no single entity that could just decide to change it on a whim or shut it all down one day because it's owned by everybody at the same time, effectively. All computers contribute to the blockchain. Well, you don't have to be a super genius to understand where I'm going with this. To try and simplify the technical aspects of how this works, most blockchain technology runs on either proof of work or proof of stake. Proof of work is essentially a system where you contribute computing power to running the blockchain. Essentially, in order to verify that all of the transactions on the blockchain are legitimate, it takes a lot of processing power, and you can contribute your computer's, say, GPU to helping run through all that processing data so that the blockchain can continue to function. And in general, you get paid for this based on how much you contribute, and so on and so forth. The problem, of course, is that not all computers are created equal. If somebody's running a computer with a 1080 from 10 years ago, and somebody else is running a computer with dual 4090s, well, you can probably tell right off the bat that the more high-end and powerful computer is going to be able to contribute a lot more to the status of the blockchain. And you can think of it as like having more votes in a voting system. If the person with the 1080 only gets one vote in how the blockchain is run, the person with the dual 4090s might get 100 votes because their computer is just that much more powerful. And this is what inevitably leads to those mining farms that you might have heard about on the news or whenever you search up cryptocurrency related things. Because the logical conclusion of this is somebody with way too much money spending way too much money on literally thousands and thousands of computer parts in order to wire them into this massive server hub that essentially can mine orders of magnitude faster and more efficiently than any one person with a personal computer could even possibly hope to compare to. So, if the first person only has 1 vote for the blockchain, and the second person has 1,000 votes for the blockchain, well, that third person with the huge server farm, they probably have like 10 million votes on the blockchain. And this actually got so bad that at some point a handful of organizations, I don't remember the exact details off the top of my head, but essentially there was about a half dozen organizations that had server farms that were so large that just those 6 groups combined represented like 70% of all of the computing power on the blockchain. So, while not any single one of them had enough power to cross that 51% threshold, which, again, think of it like votes. All you need is 51% of the votes, and then you effectively own the blockchain. Just like how you only need 51% of shares in a company or things like that. And so, these various companies that had invested into these massive server farms realized that unless they limited themselves and each other, that they could easily just group up together, and if just like 3 of these companies combined their resources, they could have like 60% of all of the computing power on the blockchain and effectively rewrite everyone's ledger to their whim. They could just put in false transactions and then just say that they're legitimate because they have all the computing power necessary to say, oh yes, no, this is the real version of the transaction. You did in fact give me all of your money previously, and that was actually just what happened, and you can't do anything to stop that. And so, yeah, like, sure, it is technically decentralized, but at the end of the day, it's just inevitable that these companies will just be able to take over the blockchain if they really wanted to. All they would have to do is just ally with each other for like a day, and then they could just wire themselves millions of dollars of digital assets and just drain everybody's wallets and then just set everything back to normal as if nothing happened and nobody would be able to do anything about it. And that's just proof of work. Proof of stake is even more laughable because proof of stake, which was sold on the idea of being able to prevent the thing that proof of work does, well, proof of stake essentially, instead of donating computing power, you donate the digital assets itself. You literally contribute cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever to the project, and then based on how much you contribute, you're able to then contribute to verifying the transactions. And it doesn't take a genius to see where this one's going either, because that just means that the already richest people who have the most money on the blockchain are able to then influence the blockchain the most. This is like setting up a bank and then making the person who runs the bank Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. Like, it's so short-sighted of an idea, and the fact that this was provided as a quote-unquote better alternative to proof of work is just laughable. The only thing that proof of stake technically does do better than proof of work is the fact that it is a lot less environmentally harmful. Proof of work requires tons of computers operating 24/7, and that just eats up tons of computing power, which eats up tons of electronic energy, which creates tons of pollution and tons of electronic waste. It's just awful. So I'll give them credit where it's due. Proof of stake at least reduced the environmental impact of the blockchain. It's still way less efficient than any traditional means that are out there, and it's still a laughable verification system that inevitably re-centralizes all of the power into the wealthy elite. But hey, credit's where it's due. Okay, so privacy is basically the most fragile concept that it has ever been on the blockchain. And no matter what systems they try to implement, all the power will always inevitably re-centralize into the hands of the wealthy elite, no matter how decentralized they like to claim it is. But at least it must offer some novel means of computer security that is simply impossible to replicate via traditional means. Right? Well, actually kinda. In a sense, at least. The blockchain is pretty hard for just some random user to hack into and steal assets or whatever. Like, yeah, it's, sure, the entire thing could theoretically collapse one day because a handful of super wealthy organizations simply work together in order to take down the entire chain. But in terms of just some user trying to hack into the mainframe and delete somebody's assets or steal stuff from their wallet, yeah, you can't really do that because the way the blockchain works, everything is, well, everything is checked via the ledger on the blockchain. If you try to change one user's computer data and change what's on their ledger, it's going to be overwritten by everyone else's ledger. You would have to change all of the ledgers on at least 51% of the computers in order to do that, and that's only really possible if you pretty much own 51% of the computers or computing power equivalent on the blockchain. And you're probably sensing that there's a but coming. So here's the thing. The way blockchain technology was developed, philosophically, if you forgive me for trying to take this away from the more technical aspects of it, the core fundamental idea is that you can essentially program away all problems that exist. Like one of the core tenets that you often hear crypto bros say is code is law. And the idea is that theoretically, maybe the code they wrote isn't perfect, but one day somebody can write a piece of code that will be the perfect program that can manage all of these things, and it will be completely flawless and unhackable and everything. And that's just not how humans work. Humans are inherently prone to change and making mistakes. The core tenets of the blockchain assume a version of humanity that is incapable of error, or if they do make an error, then the responsibility for what consequences result of that error is 100% their own fault. And otherwise, everything comes down to the code ruling everything forever, unchanging, no matter how society or people change. And it's so backwards to think that way, because fundamentally, it does not matter how secure your network is from people hacking into the mainframe and trying to decrypt your data via these algorithms and blah 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 Hollywood hacking nonsense. Because that's not how hacking works in real life. They're effectively increasing their security against a version of hacking that doesn't really exist. This idea that there's like, you know, a guy in a mask sitting in his basement on a computer hacking into a bank to steal their... Like, that doesn't happen. That's not how hacking works these days. Real-life hacking is more akin to social engineering. Essentially, the core problem is that these people are focused so hard on trying to protect their network from various hostile intrusions and whatnot that they completely forgot about the concept of PEBCAC issues, otherwise known as problem exists between chair and keyboard. AKA, you can have the most secure, impossible to hack into network possible in the universe. It's literally impossible to get into this network. And yet, if one of your users, before they're gonna log in, gets a phone call, and someone says, "Hey, this is the password authority, we're just calling to make sure that your passwords are as secure as they should be," So, just to double check how strong your password is, could you let us know what kinds of passwords you're currently using so that we can rate and review your passwords for their strength and give you some suggestions on how to improve your security? And if that user falls for that bit and tells them your password, well then it doesn't matter how secure your system is, because they could just log in with that user's password. And these types of scams can be nefarious. Like, if you want some great examples of the kinds of things that people will do to trick people into giving up their bank information, or even just having them directly transfer money into some scammer's account themselves, I highly recommend checking out Jim Browning's content and the kinds of scams that he helps try to take down, where people will start up call centers where they'll pretend to be people from Microsoft or your bank or whatever, and they'll use various clever techniques to make you think that you've made some kind of mistake or there's been some error that you need to correct instantly. And as a result, people will fall for it. Even the most tech-savvy people. Like, I'll admit, I've fallen for a scam before. It's not shameful because these people are clever. Like, they can get to even the best of us. There are tons of examples of super tech-savvy people who still fall for these scams because they're ever evolving and always getting cleverer. And as a result, it does not matter how secure your network is, because you'll never be able to stop PEBCAC issues from being able to infiltrate into that network. And as a result, what you need to do is actually provide security against those kinds of fraudulent transactions. And traditional centralized systems, where you actually have a central authority that you complete to, are actually quite good at resolving these kinds of issues. For example, a common problem that pops up in modern society is somebody steals your credit card info through some means or another. Say they just got a picture of your credit card through some hidden camera while you were shopping or something like that. And then they use that credit card info to try and buy something. Well, when you go to your bank, they can very quickly go, oh yeah, it is weird that you suddenly bought this random thing that is not at all in your past shopping habits. I'll go ahead and undo that transaction for you and get your money back. It's a common problem that happens to tons of people throughout their lives that can be very easily and quickly resolved via a normal system like this. But on the blockchain, it's anything but. The mere concept of trying to undo a fraudulent transaction fundamentally doesn't exist. The same security benefits that are granted by decentralizing the ledger and having everybody contribute to maintaining it, and thus making it basically immutable and impossible to be redacted, also means that it's basically impossible to undo a fraudulent transaction. If somebody hits you with a scam and manages to steal something out of your wallet, either via logging into your wallet by stealing your password or using some kind of keylogging program or whatever, if they're able to get into your account and steal your digital assets, they're just gone. Like, there's not really anything you can do. And this happens so often in the crypto space. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these stories of big name people in the crypto area that fall for these scams. And again, I don't even necessarily blame them for falling for it. Like I said, these scams can be really clever. So it's something that you can't just train people to always avoid 100% of the time, especially when it's not even their fault. And so it's something that needs to be taken into account when designing a system. And the blockchain just did the complete opposite of that. And as a result, these crypto bros that are so high on their own supply, trying to justify their own technology, end up resorting to victim blaming and trying to say that, like, oh, well, if you got scammed, it's your fault for losing your assets, rather than trying to actually address the real issue and solve the problem. Because so many times you hear about people holding assets for ransom, and then they act as if it's a victory when they pay the ransom and get their asset back. even though the person probably has your account information and is able to just steal it again in the future if they wanted. It's laughable that they think that this is actually secure in any means, when in reality, it is the least secure system possibly ever conceived in the digital space. So, to try and wrap this all up in a neat little bow, to summarize, the blockchain, the basis and foundation for all of these crypto projects and NFTs and everything, claims to be private while also making all of your data about your transactions publicly available for anyone to see for free. They claim to be secure while doing absolutely nothing to actually protect users against fraudulent transactions or even just basic mistakes. And they claim to be decentralized while all of the power of the blockchain naturally recoalesces into the wealthy elite. At this point, it's probably worth clarifying that just because I'm harping so hard on the blockchain and what it's trying to do, that does not mean that I necessarily am endorsing all of the traditional systems that it is trying to upend. There are tons of examples of banks going through their own slew of strifes and issues in the recent years, and there's plenty of problems that deserve criticism in the traditional system of the US and global economy. However, it is important to recognize that just because there is a problem and somebody is offering a new solution, just because something is new does not automatically mean that it is instantly better than what we had before. Hopefully this will be the last video I have to make about the blockchain or any of its adjacent related technologies. It's just so bad. Maybe if somebody manages to screw things up in some new and novel way, I might make a shorter video commenting on it, just because it's so fun to laugh at these morons. But overall, I just hope that this technology just goes away so that they can stop trying to scam people out of their money. If you want to see me make more videos like this in the future, feel free to subscribe. It helps out. And by all means, I would love to continue the conversation in the comments, because there are few things I enjoy more than just laughing at how terrible this whole concept is. And leave a like if you like the video and want to see me make more of these in the future. And if you want some recommendations on some more videos like this one that talk about how bad these technologies are, I highly recommend the channel Folding Ideas and their videos about Web3, the metaverse, and the blockchain as a whole. They make excellent documentary, feature-length style videos about these topics that go into way more depth than even I could possibly hope to achieve anytime soon. And I know that I'm only a channel with less than 150 subscribers, that I just recommended people go watch videos from a channel with nearly 1 million subscribers. But god damn it, I call that professionalism. Doesn't matter how many subscribers I have or they have, I'm still gonna recommend that you go watch their videos because they're great and they deserve it. And if by some miracle you somehow manage to find my video before theirs, I mean, that's just frankly impressive, really. But anyways, thank you for watching, and see you guys next time.